Okay. So welcome everyone. First of all, does anyone have any questions about Zoom before we get started? If not, could everyone activate their chat and use the chat for questions during the conversation between Rochelle and Peggy? And the other thing is, if everyone could just start off, because sometimes your username or visible name on Zoom is really not known to us. So if you could say who you are and what garden or what association you have with gardens, or if you're just a friend or whatever, much appreciated. So if you could just, everyone could just type that into the chat box, that would be great. And I'd like to welcome Peggy Baillie from Three Forks Farm and Rochelle Rocha from Seasons Pharmacy and Culinaria. And Rochelle and Peggy are going to have a conversation about seeds just in time for everyone to really get obsessive about starting seeds and waiting for spring. So off you go, you guys.
Hi, well, welcome, Peggy. I'm delighted that you want to make some time and talk to us about this. I know you're quite an expert, and actually, as I'm looking at the audience, I think that most of the people here have quite a little bit of expertise, or at least an understanding of seeds, but we are going to start at the beginning because this is going to be a recorded conversation, and we would like people who are part of the Community Garden Network, if they're kind of new to farming and seeds, that we're just going to start from the beginning. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in seed saving and what your journey has been to get you to be a local seed producer in the Sudbury region.
Great. Well, thank you first off for having me. It's really lovely to be here, and I feel honored to be able to share some of this knowledge, the little bit of knowledge that I do have with you folks. So thank you for inviting me. I have been seed saving for the whole journey of my time when I've been farming. So I was really blessed to have one of my best friends is a seed saver out of Peterborough. Her name's Jill Bishop, and she runs Urban Tomato Seeds. And years ago, I hate to say how many, but we were farming together, and she started teaching me about seed saving. And since that time, I had been seed saving and felt that it was a fundamental, important part of being a local food activist and a farmer and someone who is passionate about food, because if you don't have seed, you don't have food. And so it's kind of like the foundation of all of our food system. And so I've continued to save seed for many years. And it wasn't until I completed the organic vegetable seed producer certificate through the Canadian Organic Growers that I felt confident enough in my knowledge to take my seed saving to the next level, where I would feel confident enough to sell my seeds to other people, just because there is a lot of integrity required to have seed that's viable for sale. And there's a lot of information that I just wasn't feeling confident about, but thankfully I was able to take that course, and it gave me a lot of knowledge. And since then, we've been growing seed on our farm for sale in the limited quantities that we can. And we are now in a position where we're expanding our seed production significantly over the next couple of years. And we've started doing contract growing for other seed companies in Ontario. So
last year we were lucky enough to have some of your seeds available for sale, and I guess with the pandemic and the great demand on seeds, we're not going to be able to resell your seeds. So how can people buy your seeds this year?
So the limited quantities that we have this year available for sale are available on our website. So we have a website called threeforksfarms.com. So all of our seed is available there for sale.
That's great. And I really strongly encourage everybody to buy seeds, buy locally adapted. So why is locally adapted seeds important? Why should we care about that?
So I like to use an analogy when we're thinking about regionally adapted seeds. And if you took me, for example, and you put me in the Arctic, and you said, Peggy, you're going to live in the Arctic now, and I want you to thrive in the Arctic. I would not thrive in the Arctic because I'm not adapted to living in the Arctic, right? The same thing as if you took me and put me in Jamaica or like somewhere in the Caribbean. I would be wilting. I would be having a really hard time because I'm just not climatically adapted to the conditions there. And the same thing goes with any plant on the plant or species on the planet. So if you take a species that's been grown in a different place and you try to grow it in a different climate, it's not going to thrive. And one of the things that people don't realize is that particularly over the last 15 to 20 years, but more lengthily over the since World War II, most of our seed is actually being grown in concentrated areas. So for example, Denmark is like the leading spinach producer. And so if anybody's had issues growing spinach because it bolts so quickly here in our climate, it might have something to do with the fact that Denmark is significantly colder than us, has very different climatic conditions. And so the species of spinach that we're growing isn't actually adapted to our region. And so when we regionally adapt seeds, so that means growing varieties in our climate for many, many years, multiple years, the plant itself will adapt to our climatic conditions that will allow it to thrive in a different way than it would if it was just imported from somewhere else. So the importance of building, because right now Canada is a very low in seed production, part of our goals is that we are really trying to increase the number of regionally adapted seed varieties that will work specifically in Canada as a primary goal, and then also in our microclimates, like say Northern Ontario, so that we can have better varieties that will thrive for our gardens.
So if I go to the hardware store in the spring and I buy seeds, spinach is coming from Denmark. Where are most of the other seeds coming from?
They're coming from all over the world. So depending on what it is, different regions have become kind of key leaders in different species or families. So for example, there's a lot of stuff that's being grown in California is a leading seed area. Oregon is a leading seed area. Israel, New Zealand, Denmark. These are all kind of key areas where a lot of the seed around the world is coming from. And it depends on the crop. Most carrot seed is coming from California or Oregon in North America. And so it really depends on what it is. And it's hard to say exactly without looking more.
So this is one of Jenny's wildflower seed packets.
Yeah.
So if I go to and I could probably pull out of the boxes I have here different seed packets. Will a seed packet tell us where it was originated from?
No.
So there are no labeling requirements in Canada around origin of seed?
No.
Okay. So in the Sudbury region, there's Jenny that produces some wildflowers. There's you that produces. There were a couple of other Northern Ontario seed producers, but I can't seem to find them. Are you aware of any other Northern Ontario seed producers?
There is Superior Seeds out of Thunder Bay is another seed group. It's like a collective of seed producers, and their site, I just checked in with them. Their site is going to go live again February 1st, I think. So they'll have seed available then. But in terms of anyone that's there was that Pie Bird out of North Bay.
Are they still in business?
I know they were selling seed, but I don't know if they still are.
All right, because I do have some seeds in my collection from them, Vegan Pie Bird, what they were called, and they were always at CD Sunday. As the organizers of CD Sunday, we've been really trying to figure out how to get all of you local growers, because it's really important, I think, as a community, that if we want to have local seed savers, we got to buy from you guys so you can afford to do it again next year. So really, really important to support you guys. Back to the seed package. Can you explain to us the difference between what's a GMO seed, what's a hybrid seed, and what's open pollinated? These are terms that are thrown out, and I just would like for you to walk us through what they mean and why we care about those terms.
Okay, no problem. I can do that. So I'm going to go the opposite direction, open pollinated, hybrid, GMO, because it'll make more sense that way. So open pollinated means, so you take two varieties. So say we're talking about tomatoes. I'll use tomatoes as an example. Say we're taking Black Russian and and a brandy wine. Those are two varieties. So an open pollinated variety is that it will pollinate within its own family. Um, and most plants, like most varieties, at any plant species that you have, can pollinate and be open pollinated amongst its own family. The difference between an open pollinated and a hybrid is if you, say, for example, intentionally take that black Russian and that brandywine and you intentionally cross them. So you take the pollen from one variety and you cross it specifically with another variety with that intention. And what will happen is the next year is that you have what's called the F1. And so it's the cross of those two varieties. And usually what happens is when breeders are crossing two varieties, they have specific traits that they're looking for. So it may be, it's strong stems, it's certain branching, it could be the uniformity of the fruit, it could be any specific qualities that each of these different varieties may have. And when they cross them, they create kind of a superior blend of the two, right? It's like when we breed, we make beautiful crosses of two people, right? Same kind of concept. Now, what will happen is if you take that hybrid and you were to save seed from it and you were to grow it out the next year, which would be called your F2 year, what would happen is that you would actually have that hybrid will split and it will have 50%, in theory, 50% will still be the cross. So 50% of the plants that you grow out from that seed will be a perfect cross. 25% will be from the mother plant and 25% will be from the father plant, so where the pollen came from. So when you save seed from a hybrid, you won't get the same variety the next year in entirety. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, you're getting more of the genetic diversity expressing itself the farther you go away from that first generation planting.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if we want to talk about what genetically modified is it's going down to a molecular DNA level where in a lab, they're taking the actual DNA of, say, tomato and crossing it with a zucchini kind of thing. So it's two totally different species, two totally different families of plants, and they're crossing them in a way that isn't natural in a way that that plants wouldn't naturally cross, and therefore getting traits or a result that will come from specific genes of each variety. So you can't save seed from that in a way that it will produce anything that will come out similar to what it looks like in that first generation. And I think anyone who's concerned about GMOs should look up the list of approved GMO crops in Canada. We actually have very few approved GMO crops in Canada. Most vegetable crops are not approved. I don't know of any GMO vegetable crops at this point. In Canada, in other countries, there is fruits that are GMO, but in Canada, I don't know of any.
I'm really glad you raised that because that was one of my questions, is that should people be concerned about accidentally buying a genetically modified seed at the hardware store?
If you're growing vegetables, I wouldn't be concerned about it. If you're growing, with the exception of corn, so the corn would be the only exception. However, sweet corn is not something that's traditionally GMO. There's not a lot of GMO sweet corn, but corn is one variety that I would be aware of. And then if you're getting into growing grains, that's something else to be thinking about. So
some of our grains are genetically modified.
Yeah.
And I think the other point that I'd like to make across is, what's the point of genetic modification? Why is the industrial food system genetically modifying certain crops? What's the point of it?
I think there's a lot of different opinions about that, but my opinion is that it gives more authority and control by the seed company over that seed. So say, for example, they produce a genetically modified crop. They have control. Nobody can reproduce it in the same way. They have patent authority over it. So if, say, a farmer really likes a specific GMO crop, they're more likely to keep growing that variety, and so they become kind of I don't know what other word to use other than prisoner to the seed company, because they can only use that crop. And the other thing I would say is that many GMO crops, particularly in cash cropping, so large field production, are designed specifically to be used with a specific inputs regimen. So that could be either a fertilizer or a herbicide or a pesticide regimen. So they're genetically modified so that they won't be, say, for example, killed by a certain herbicide, or they won't be impacted by a certain. And so it also ties the farmer specifically to using a whole regiment of how to grow that crop. Which means they have to buy the inputs from the seed company and the seed from the seed company. And so it's kind of giving more, in my opinion, this is my anti-capitalist perspective, but I think that that's kind of a leading motivation by a lot of companies. And for me personally, I think my main opposition is that the farmer no longer has control over the seed. So for centuries, the inherent right of farmers has been to save your seeds and trade them and be able to improve them in the ways that you think you need to. Whereas when we get into GMOs, it takes away that inherent right and forces very specific crop production practices that may not be profitable or be good for the environment.
That's a really good. Does anybody have a question? Does Peggy clarified the differences between open pollinated, genetically modified, and hybrid to everybody's satisfaction? You can type in the comment. I'm going to keep my eye on the type of comments. I think that was really clear, and I'm really glad. I think one of the takeaways for me is that I can be confident that I'm not accidentally buying a genetically modified vegetable anywhere in the Canadian supply chain. What I will be buying is probably some F1 hybrids. And will an F1 hybrid be written on the package? What am I going to see on the package with respect to open pollinated? What is some of the terminology? Heirloom is another terminology that we see on seed packets. So if we're looking at a seed packet, what kinds of things should we be looking for on a seed packet when we're planting our personal or community gardens?
Yeah, so normally if something is a hybrid, it will say that it is a hybrid. Usually seed companies will say such. Or when you're looking at the seed catalog, it will say. So that's a key thing to watch out for. The other thing I would say that is kind of key to watch out for is when you're buying seed, you want to, most seed companies will have something that will say, so I'm just looking at a seed pack, but will say the year that it was packed on and when it was tested. And I think that that's kind of like the key thing that you want to look for, because sometimes, say you'll go to the hardware store and you'll buy some seeds. It doesn't say where it was when it was packed or when it was tested. And that's kind of key. Seed only lasts for so many years, and depending on how it's stored, its germination rates will go down. So when I buy a seed pack and it says it was tested for 2020, I know that the germination, it was tested for its germination in 2020. That means that, and there's certain standards that any seed company has to adhere to before they're allowed to sell seed, in terms of the level of germination that they're required to have when they sell seed. And so if it doesn't have that information, you don't know if it's like even viable, or like how long it's been since it's been germ tested. So I think that that is kind of critical information you want to look for, because there are some companies that may get away with, selling seed that hasn't been tested in a while. So I think that's important to look for.
So if we're going to try to embark on a journey of trying to save seeds from our community gardens, would it be fair to say that we should probably try to buy open pollinated varieties instead of hybridized varieties?
It's probably going to be the easiest first step. I would say it's open pollinated varieties is what you would probably want to start with. Yes.
The disadvantage of an open pollinated variety might be that your yield might not be as strong or your fruit might not be as big, because when you have the hybridized, they're designed for things like yield and size, right? And so it might be tempting to buy a hybrid to improve your yield. But if you're planning to save seeds, it might not be the right choice. Do I have that right?
Hi, Michelle. Sorry, my internet went out for a second. Can you repeat that?
So if I'm running a community garden and I want to try to save more seeds, I should try to buy open pollinated. But I might be tempted to buy a hybrid because a hybrid might give me more yield or a bigger fruit or more fruit on the branch. Because to me, the hybrids, in my understanding of seed production, is the hybrids are designed for more maximal efficiency or maximal growth or maximal size, as opposed to an open pollinated, which might not give me as many fruits or as big of fruits. But if I tried to save my seeds from my open pollinated products, my likelihood of having success the following years will be higher.
Right. Yeah, so I'll just comment on two things. So one thing about hybrids is that there's this thing that's called hybrid vigor. So no scientist has identified why this happens, but when you have your first generation cross, you have this thing that's called hybrid vigor. And that's what you're talking about, where the plant will produce more and will have higher yields and things like that. And they have not identified why that happens, but that is something that happens. And that is one of the reasons why hybrids are attractive to many gardeners and farmers. So if you're looking at like high yield and like right now and instantaneous results, then maybe hybrid is something you want to look at. But if you're looking at something you want to save seed from and try and keep it the true and have the same thing year after year, is that looking at an open pollinated variety. One of the reasons, what other reasons that I just want to make clear is about why open pollinated varieties tend to not be as, not all varieties, but a lot of them may not be as strong, or this is sometimes considered common in what's called heirloom varieties or like heritage varieties, is that over the past, I would say 30 or 40 years, less time has been spent on honing and taking care of those varieties in not letting them like have genetic drift. And so I don't want to digress too much, but what happens is that when people are just like kind of freely just saving seeds and they're just like not thinking about what they're looking for, or like looking for yield, like saving fruit from the plants that have high yield or have specific structures, then what happens is we have genetic drift. And so then sometimes the yield will go down and there'll be a lot of variability and things like that. That's sometimes the case with open pollinated varieties, not always. It all depends on what you're growing. And it's only with experience that once you try different varieties, you'll learn what you like and what you don't like, and which varieties work for you. And that's kind of one of the glorious parts about farming. And one of the great things about having a community garden network like this is that you can talk with your fellow gardeners and you can say, what varieties do you like? Do you like this? And share varieties based on what works best, which I think is really, really wonderful. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it kind of is my approach to that.
Cool. One more thing you mentioned earlier that I'd like to come back to is I got all these seeds, and there's lots of seeds in here. So I'm not planting them all this year. What's the best way for me to store them so that next year they're still going to be viable?
Right. So the number one thing that you want to be conscious of when you're storing seed is humidity. So your seeds need to be at a low humidity when they're put into their storage. So whether you've saved seed or whether it's from the seed packet. So, don't leave your seed packets like outside in the rain or like outside overnight and they get kind of collect dew and things like that, and then just put them away in a jar. You want to make sure that they're really dry. So that's the first and most critical thing. And preferably in a dark location and something that's not too hot. So a cool, dark, dry spot is the best conditions. Some people will choose to freeze seed, and which you can do if you're looking for like your apocalypse seed bank or something. But if you do choose to freeze your seeds, you need to, one, again, make sure that their humidity is very low in the package when they're going in, and the seed, the dryness of the seed is dry, like that they don't have too much moisture in the seed. And then the other thing is, if you're pulling your seeds out of frozen storage, you need to let them come to temperature in the package that they're stored in before you open the package. And that's because humidity will condensation will collect inside the package and create humidity, and then could damage your seed if you're taking it out of storage. So best case is dry, dark, and cool.
So let's say I pulled some seeds out and I wanted to do, is there any kind of a quick test to sort of test the viability? Like, I know when I got tree seeds, I threw them in a glass of water. The ones that sank were viable. The one that floated were no good. Like, do you recommend anything like that for any seeds, or just plant them?
Well, if you want to do your germ test, you can do a pretty simple germination test where you, for small seeds, like say tomatoes or things like that, you can just take a piece of paper towel, spray it down with some water, put your seeds out on that paper towel, spray them again with just water, nothing else, just water. Kind of roll that up, making sure that it's not it's not smushed, like that there's still a little bit of airflow around that paper towel. Put it in like say a Ziploc container or a plastic bag that's somewhat open, that has a bit of an opening. You don't want to suffocate the seed, and then let it germinate. So you just want to check on it every day to make sure that it hasn't dried out. So you may need to spray a bit more water in it, and then depending on the variety or what you're trying to germinate, it could be anywhere from like 3 to 21 days, you'll see how it germinates.
It could take as long as 21.
Okay. At a minimum, yeah. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm trying to test my parsnip seeds and I threw that batch out. I'm gonna try again. Okay. So how long seeds last? So are there any sort of guidelines? Like, do some seeds kind of last forever and some you better plant them in 1 or 2 years or they're done? Like, do you have any guidelines for us as to how long we should be keeping seeds in our collection?
Yeah. I'm not sure if you. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Because
yes,
my internet keeps cutting out. Okay.
Stop for a moment, but you're back.
Okay, so one of the key things is anything from the allium family. So that's onions, leeks, things like that. So those seeds, they're only viable for usually 1 year. So you want to renew your onion and allium seeds every year. So that's the key thing. Other things that will depreciate over time more quickly are things like carrots their germination rate goes down quite quickly. And then other seeds, most vegetable seeds have a lifespan of 3 to 5 years. 3 years being kind of, they can maintain their peak viability, and then they start to decline, and this all depends on storage. So as we know from, Egyptian tombs and things like that, where seeds have been brought out and they're still viable. It all depends on storage conditions, but usually 3 years is a good gauge of time.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're getting close to the end of our timeline. So I'm just wondering if you have any sort of wrap up closing comments of things that I didn't ask you that you wished I would have, and then we have a few minutes to take questions from the floor.
I think one thing I would say is everyone should save seeds. And I think I'm so glad you're having this conversation, because it's a really important part of food security. The other thing I think maybe I should touch on that I didn't is about crossing. So something that people don't, there's some great resources. Sorry, I'm digressing, but one of the great resources, Seeds of Diversity, has this book, which I would highly recommend to anyone who's thinking about saving seeds. You can order it on their website. Also, Seeds of Diversity has a lot of great resources that are just for free on their website. But this is a great beginner's resource if you're thinking about saving seed. And one of the key things that I love in this book is at the back is that there's this great chart that talks about the isolation distance between varieties. So like I was saying, when open pollinated things, when we create hybrids or when things cross, we have to be cognizant. So say, for example, if we're growing 4 different varieties of tomato in our community garden box, even though they're like self-pollinating plants, they may actually cross. And so the next year you may not get true to type fruit. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about that, but just thinking about isolation distance and learning a little bit about what things will cross with each other when you're thinking about intentionally saving seed, I think is something worthwhile to learn about and think about.
I did order, I think, 10 of those books to come in here from Bob, because they are sending out some CD Sunday stuff to us. So I hopefully will have a few copies of those here. I have 2 French versions, if anybody speaks French, but I tried to order some more English ones. So I'm glad you raised that as a resource. So I think everybody muted themselves. Thank you for doing that. But if you have a question, please remove yourself off mute and I'll see the little thing change, and then I'll let you ask your question. So does anybody have a question for Peggy? Everybody's being shy. Nobody has any questions. Does anybody have a story to share about how they've either saved some seeds in their garden and had a great success or a terrible success? I know that Leanne was asking a question earlier about should she plant those delicata squashes that she saved from her crop.
So I have a question about sort of once you get past the first step. So let's say that I've saved a small jar of bean seeds from last year. And like, should I just be planting those seeds and then collecting again? Or should I be buying like a matching complement of new seed of the same variety and then setting it out? So what are your thoughts on that?
So if your intentions are to keep saving seeds off a variety for many years, one of the things, and this again is covered in the book that I mentioned, is one of the things you want to be thoughtful of is about minimum number of plants. So every different vegetable type will have a minimum number of plants that you want to be planting and selecting from, to make sure that over years that you don't narrow your genetics too much. So you want to make sure that these plants are crossing within each other and they're kind of moving around, and so that you have a wide enough genetic diversity within even just each plant has its own kind of uniqueness, that you have enough genetic diversity. So that was something to be cognizant of. But yes, you could definitely just plant those beans the next year and then keep saving from them. Something you might, depending on how special those seeds are for you, you might not want to plant all of them, so that say if something were to go wrong, God forbid, something gets into them, deers eat them like they ate mine, then you have some backup that you could plant out the next year, and then you could hopefully save seed from them the following year.
Had a really interesting, I planted a whole row of dragon's tongue bean, which many of you know is my favorite bean. And I got them from Ottawa, Greta's Organic Garden. And 2 plants came up and gave me green potted with purple stripes, and everything else was yellow potted with purple stripes. So I made sure to save some from all of them, including the green one, because I thought that was so cool. That one came up with a green and purple striped. I don't know if that was an accident, but I thought it was pretty cool. So I kept those on purpose. Leanne, do you have a question? I see you've unmuted yourself.
No, I'm good. Thanks, Peggy. It was really interesting.
And just to speak to your 2 plants that had the green, you know, there's a lot of varieties that will have started from that. You know, there's a lot of great stories, like if anyone has grown Blacktail Mountain watermelons, that was a total mistake that happened in someone's backyard. And they just, two watermelons crossed and they were like, this is an amazing watermelon. And they just saved that fruit, and then they were able to keep growing it out. So there is, you know, something to be said about being aware of what's happening naturally in your garden. And maybe if you're paying attention, you can, you know, be the next developer of a new variety.
So I do have a question. If we're conscious about trying to save some information on our packs that we're donating to the seed swap, I have like the name and then the year that I picked it. Do you think there's anything else very important that we should include on our packages?
Name.
Like, I think for the average gardener, maybe that's good. So it just made me think, because I did save some of your watermelon seeds from my garden last year that I bought from you.
Yeah.
And I hope to continue those in my own garden too. But if there, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I should, you know, how many years it was planted, or I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think it's about having realistic, what's manageable in the circumstances, and you know, sometimes having, I don't know that I have any comments on that, because I think it's a more complex question than I would know how to answer.
Sure.
I think if you had a lot of seeds, like let's say you harvested that watermelon and you had like 300 seeds. What you could do, I think that might be helpful, is just do a germination test on 10 of them. And then you could comment like, you know, expect a 50% germination rate or expect a 90% germination rate, so that we know as gardeners that whether we should be putting 3 seeds in the hole or 6. That might be a useful piece of information if you had a lot of seeds from that particular thing that you harvested.
Actually, that was one really interesting thing. I thought that they would never grow. It took them so long to come up, and I almost gave up on them. And then they flourished. I kept telling Eric every weekend I'd see him, I'd be like, I can't believe this.
Right.
I think, you know, including the story on the seed packet is nice.
Yeah.
You know, hang in there. It's going to grow. Well, listen, if we don't have any other questions, Peggy, I just really wanted to thank you, and thank you for being like a local seed saver. And I'm for sure going to buy some seeds from your website. And I'm looking forward to, I know that you're going to be a speaker at the CD Sunday event. So I'll just do a little pitch for the CD Sunday event, which is going to be online. Several people on this call are organizing or helping to organize that event, but we're going to shamelessly promote it. It's February 21st. I'm not exactly sure what time you're on. I think we just did some adjustments to our schedule. Leanne, what time is Peggy on?
I've got you at noon, Peggy.
At noon. So Peggy's on at noon. So if you want to, it's not going to be exactly this topic. It'll be a similar topic around seed saving and organic, locally adapted seeds and the importance of that, and seed sovereignty and food sovereignty. So I invite you all to spread the word about CD Sunday through your networks. And we look forward to hearing from you again, Peggy, very soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I will sign off then, and I'll let you guys do your thing. But thanks so much. And if anyone has any questions about seed saving, I'm always happy to answer where I can. So you can reach us through our website or Facebook or on other things. So
awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rochelle. Okay, I'm going to stop recording the CD segment here.